So the question is, how do you handle a character feeling overpowered, or like an original character specifically? The first answer to this would be, what's the goal? Usually when people talk about being overpowered, they usually say, try to avoid having your character be too quick or too easy to get their power. Another one is out of proportion with the other characters around them. And a third is like out of proportion with the difficulty of the plot. So like if you have a character that gets it really quick and easy, that's fairly common. You know, they touch the magic crystal and the story begins. So that's not like a hard and fast rule, never do that. And the same thing's true with the second. Don't be out of proportion with the other characters, but what if you have, you know, the emperor of all time who also is a space marine, and it's amazing and a fun story, and you're like, wait, but no one is even close. Does that mean that it's a bad story? No, I mean, there's amazing stories that do that. And the third one, though, is the thing that's a little bit harder to do, when you have a character that's out of proportion with the plot problem that you've given them. Because then you have a story where it's like, oh no, I dropped my spoon, I picked it up, the end. Aha! And it can struggle to make a compelling narrative because of that. So like, that one's a little harder to have a character that works with, but if you watch the anime One Punch Man, that's exactly what they do, and it's phenomenal. So when you say like, how do you avoid a character being overpowered? My question would then be, why do you want to avoid them feeling overpowered? Because then you can kind of pick which of those problems you're trying to address and address them accordingly. If what you want is for them to not be like too quick or easy because your plot is them developing the power, and then if it's quick and easy, then your plot is over in the first chapter, well then you know what your problem is, and that's a pacing problem, and you can study pacing and learn how to do that, and there's a whole ton to be said there. And then the other thing is like, if you don't want them to be out of proportion with the other characters, you can bring the other characters up, like the Avengers, or you can bring them down to match and be only a little bit more powerful than them, and you can have something where you just have like the leader of the pack feeling. You know, there's any range of solutions there depending on how you want your team to feel, or your group to feel, or like not have a group at all. Like, that's a story question for like how you build your character dynamic for like what you want it to feel like. And then the third is like, how do you make sure that you give your plot problem in proportion to whatever power you gave your characters? Which then is that kind of like plotting issue of how do you figure out a problem that would really challenge your character. The way I like to do that personally is I like to figure out if I want to provide like an emotional problem or like a physical problem to my character. If I want my character to change a lot emotionally, I want to give them an emotional problem. And if I want them to like become even more powerful and rare, I kind of want to give them a physical problem. That's the way I look at it. And then since a lot of times I want both transformations to take place, I really like emotionally driven stories, I want to give them both. And that's something I've been working on lately, is like how to give them both. Now, with all of this, like at the end of the day, remember the biggest thing is whether or not you're telling the story that you have in mind. So I wouldn't get like all up in your head of like, oh gosh, I want him to be like a god amongst men and no one else is similar, and the problem he has to solve is like picking up a spoon, and that's the story I want to write. And it's like, okay, go write that story. It might be that people are going to respond going like, hey, that's not the story I want to read. Like, I want to read a story where a character doesn't feel overpowered, and you're like, I didn't write that story because I didn't want to. So like with any and all of this, there's a reminder to make sure that you look at the rules for like how they make people feel and what stories they would result in, and just make sure that you're going towards the one that hits the story you want to write, and not like to make sure that you're following the rules. Because otherwise that's going to have you write the story that other people have written, is maybe even a good story, but it's not your story, and that's never going to feel as fulfilling, and you're much less likely to finish it and enjoy it and reread it in the future and love it. You know, and that's the main goal. So I would say like, make sure that you just know how you want your story to feel, and then arrange yourself with that. Happy writing!